In recent years, FC Barcelona have been regarded as one of the worst clubs when it comes to managing transfer market, losing players for small sums and sometimes for free, when they could have sold them for large sums, to the extent that they signed 3 players for more than 390 million euros and sold them a few years later for just 90 million, meaning they lost 300 million and gained nothing on the ground. If you think that the cause of this problem is that they are just bad transfers and that they want to get rid of them by any means necessary, you are wrong. There are even more reasons than you think, and that's what we're going to find out in this video. First of all, as you know, FC Barcelona are currently going through a difficult financial crisis, which means that they have to sell players and use the sums to pay the club's bills, and so they become the weaker party when negotiation with clubs begin, because they know they have to sell and can't keep the player. I mean, imagine someone in our daily lives who we know needs money and who offers to sell some of his household items that we don't need at all. We can buy them cheaply because we know he has to sell them, even at loss, to pay his bills. So we'll give him a small sum, and if he doesn't accept, we don't need his stuff, but he will end up accepting at any price. Of course, this is just an example, because if someone we know needs money, we will help them. But in the world of business and negotiations, each side exploits the other's weaknesses. And the problem with Barcelona is that they are a big team who want to get back to winning title like they used to, because they found themselves in a bad situation after Messi left, and they started to move from one stage to another, and so they got rid of the lower quality players and signed higher quality players after each year, which means that they started with Luke de Jong and Aubameyang stage, and then when things got better, they got rid of them in every way possible to sign Lewandowski and Rafinha. One of the other reasons why Barcelona get rid of certain players is their high salaries, and this issue in Barcelona is an old one. I mean, decades ago they were the most clubs in the world paying high salaries, because every time they renewed the contract of any player, they increased his salary. And as you know, this is one of the reasons that made the club enter this crisis, because they couldn't afford overtime. For example, they signed Griezmann for 120 million euros and they gave him a high salary that they couldn't stand, and after they sold him to the club they bought him from for just 20 million euros, because Atletico Madrid told them they could keep him if they wanted a higher fee, but they couldn't and only accepted 20 million. And also the mismanagement of the transfer market, where they signed players quickly without thinking that they might not suit Barcelona's way of playing. So you see them buying players and playing them in the wrong position. We all remember that Griezmann wasn't brilliant with Barcelona, but he's playing well with France and Atletico. So players are left on the bench, their market value drops, and they are sold for derisory sums. And all this is nothing new. It means they always lose players with a few cents and buy players they don't need and sell them after a year or two. We all remember how they got rid of Samuel Eto'o, who was performing well, and signed Zlatan Ibrahimovic only because he was considered one of the best players in the world for 67.5 million euros, which was considered a lot of money at the time. And we all know that Eto'o helped Inter Milan win the treble and eliminated Barcelona in the semi-final, and that Zlatan didn't perform as well as he should have because of his problems with Guardiola. And a year later they loaned him out and end up selling him for just 24 million euros, without forgetting their weakness in negotiations when it comes to renewing players' contracts. Because how is it possible to buy a player like Dembélé for 135 million euros and set the value of the release clause at 50 million, which means you have to be drunk to sign that contract? And we saw how they lost him to PSG when they activated his release clause. Not to mention the fact that the media that supports FC Barcelona is one of the worst in the world for its attacks on players and calls for them to leave. I mean, every year there is a certain list of players on which information and rumors are published to the effect that they have to leave. because they are damaging the club and that the coach doesn't want them. The last player who had to leave because of these attacks was Frank Kessie, who was sold for just 12.5 million to Al Ahly. Although Saudi Arabia are known to pay a lot and could have sold him for more easily, but the media promoted the idea that the coach didn't want him. In recent years, we've had the impression that Barcelona is like the person who asks his friends to visit him, and when they arrive, he asks them to leave straight away because he doesn't have enough rooms for them and he has nothing to eat in the house. So if the media stops spreading these ideas, it will help the club to negotiate. I mean, sometimes we are surprised when we see a player who was on the bench at one of the other clubs and after they sell him for a large sum, and the reason is that the club always shows its desire to keep the player and doesn't want to sell him. You may ask me what the media has to do with the club. You should know that in Spain they are controlled by the clubs and publish what they want, and if they publish something the club doesn't like, they can ask them to take it down. They are the worst of all time and they are known for spreading illusions, and they always spread the news that a superstar player is close to sign for Barcelona, like Haaland or Mbappe, and now we hear about Bernardo Silva, who is worth 100 million, even if they are in crisis, and we always hear from them the idea of Messi or Neymar coming back, although they know that it's difficult. But let's be realistic. Today they have players who aren't good enough and who are old, so they lose them for small sums or for free, because they often go to small clubs that can't pay much for them, and if they stay at Barcelona they will just harm the club, so it's better to sell them even if it's at a loss. But we repeat that even if these players aren't that good, they could have sold them for more if they'd had more ability to negotiate and if they'd known how to manage crisis. I mean, if you look at all the players who have left, you will find that they are players who deserve more money. I mean, how the club sells Depay for just 3 million. Yes, he's not that good, but he deserves more. So we can say that there is not just one reason for this problem, but several, the most important of which are the financial crisis they are going through, as well as the problem of the media destroying the club and not helping it in this situation.